The Donkey Kong bongos are one of my favorite accessories of all time. I've made a video about all the Donkey Kong bongos games that I recommend you give a watch before watching this video, but there's only 2 of them, which I always found to be a huge shame. There was, however, one more game that was planned to use the accessory, Donkey Kong Barrel Blast. The game was originally in development for the GameCube, but by the time they got to showing it off, the Wii was already out, and it was doubtful that people would buy it for an older system, especially if you needed a specific accessory to play. So they pushed the game over to the Wii, changed the bongo controls to motion controls, and called it a day. The critics didn't like that very much. The game was beaten to death by reviewers. IGN and GameSpot gave it a 4.5 out of 10, Metacritic gave it a 46, and GamePro called it the worst game of 2007. That last one seems a little harsh. Like, yes, this isn't very good, especially considering all the amazing games that came out in 2007, but you cannot look me in the eye and say that this game is worse than the B-movie video game. You can't. So I'm gonna go into this one with an open mind. I'm not expecting much from it, but let's see if it's any good.
Considering the game was developed for the GameCube, the visuals look like that of the GameCube, which is a big problem for some, but I really don't think they're that bad. I mean, the jump from GameCube to Wii wasn't much of anything to begin with. You look at late GameCube games and early Wii games and you can hardly tell them apart. If this exact game was on GameCube, I'd argue it's one of the better looking games on the system, but because it's on next-gen hardware it doesn't look good, that's a flawed argument. No one hates the first Uncharted game because it looks bad. It was a super early title in the system's life, and the capabilities of the PS3 weren't fully realized at that point, so it's totally understandable. But then in this game it's a flaw. No, it was developed with the GameCube in mind, just like Twilight Princess. You don't see people criticizing that for its visuals. I don't think there is an argument to be made there. For an early title on the system, the visuals suffice, but one thing I do not understand is why they didn't release it on both the Wii and the GameCube. Again, they did this with Twilight Princess, but they also did this with some other games with the label New Play Control. Many normal GameCube games were thrown on the Wii with motion controls, and I think the same should have been done here. If they released it on the GameCube as they originally intended, with bongo controls and all, then released a New Play Control version on the Wii the same day, it would have been fine. If they did that, I wouldn't advise buying the Wii version, but if it had to be on that system, they should have made that the afterthought. But I guess if you do that, it's no longer an exclusive to the Wii, and you know how many sentences you hear that begin with,
"I bought the Nintendo Wii for Donkey Kong Barrel Blast." Yeah.
As soon as the game came out, it was labeled as mundane and forgotten about. It didn't sell well, and it most definitely would have sold more had it been on the GameCube as well, so I really do not see why they did this. Taking the bongo control out of a game that was built around that completely strips it of its identity. You don't build a game around a specific control method, then change just that and release it. That's stupid. That's the biggest thing wrong with this game. It is not a game that should have motion controls. Hell, everyone is flying around on bongo jets. It's clearly supposed to be played with the bongos. You take that out of the game, and yes, it is absolutely a bad game. The controls are solid enough. You pretend to hit bongos with the Wiimote and nunchuck to speed up, hit left or right to go that direction, and pull up to jump. It works. But the motion controls are even less precise than bongo hits. When you're shaking the controllers to speed up, you pull one up just a little too much and you're jumping whether you want to or not. This doesn't seem that bad, but play the game and you'll know exactly why it's such an annoyance. It's incredibly imprecise. When you start to speed up your hits, you'll move the direction of the controller you shook first, and it takes a second to recognize you're trying to speed up and will send you off course. If you're aligned with a shortcut barrel and attempt to speed up beforehand, odds are you'll shoot to one side and end up missing the thing since it has to be hit head on. Thankfully, the tracks aren't super complex or intricate as they were built around an imprecise controller, but this straightforward approach takes a lot of the fun out of the races. There's a couple shortcuts around the tracks, but they're hard to miss and don't add much of anything. The tracks have an incredible amount of variety though. You got jungle, snow, desert, beach, lava, and yeah, how innovative. Literally the same level tropes as used in New Super Mario Bros., and we all know how fresh those games are. There's a decent amount of tracks, but they aren't very different from one another, and I wouldn't consider the selection to be one of the game's strengths. Besides the standard Grand Prix and single race, there isn't a ton to do. The menu looks like there's a lot, but the left side is all racing, and the right side has training, records, options, and a mission mode and Candy's challenges. Don't get your hopes up. These missions are lame. Break barrels, hit players with items, don't get in last, just stupid little things that don't add anything to the game but an annoying chore. I only did a couple and decided it wasn't worth it. There are quite a few unlockable characters, which is cool, but half are unlocked by completing cups on easy mode and the other half are unlocked by completing some challenges, so there's not much content there either. Okay, for all the crap I've given this game, I'll say the racing itself is relatively complex for a Nintendo racing game, which is a good thing. While the controls suck, I wouldn't call the gameplay boring if you know what you're doing. Each track is littered with bananas, and when you collect 50 and you fill up the meter on the right, a flame on the side fills up and allows you to perform a wild move. Just hold back on the control stick and let go to launch forward. Then you can break barrels when you run into them, as opposed to being halted, and with each one you hit, you can stay in this wild move for a little bit longer, so when you activate it, you'll want to aim for everything you can. Besides the barrels though, everything else that would normally slow you down brings you right back to normal speed. This is a ton of fun to use. Plowing through opponents and obstacles to stay at a blazing speed is a ton of fun. However, the game makes it very hard for players that are behind to do this and make a comeback, even if you're a seasoned pro like myself. You see, when bananas are collected, they disappear for a few seconds, so the people in the front of the pack will collect them all and get wild moves, while the people toward the back will get the scraps and struggle to get any boost. And the items don't do much at all. Most attack an opponent, which is sorta handy, and a couple give you more bananas, so they're fine, but they really don't help a ton when you're behind. It's very hard to maintain the lead though. If you're thrown off your groove and hit something, your speed hits 0 and takes a second to get back up, so it allows those behind you to make something happen. So in order to clutch a come from behind win, you'll have to rely on the opponents in front of you making mistakes, which is pretty likely to occur. Even with that said, I still think it's a quite strategic racer, especially considering the control scheme. Is it a great game? God no, but is its existence justified? I'd argue, yeah, it is. The game did quite a bit right and has a solid amount going for it, but the controls really hold it back. I genuinely think if this was released for the GameCube as it was intended to be, it would be an awesome game. It fits right in with the other DK Bongos games and would be a perfect complementary game to them. A platforming game with some brawling, a rhythm game with some fun arcade-esque minigames, and a strategic racing game? That is the perfect trinity of Bongo video games, but alas, Barrel Blast wasn't allowed to be a part of that and is thus a mediocre game stuck on a console that it doesn't belong on with a horrible control scheme.
It really is a shame. This game will never be played as intended and will always be labeled as mundane, and as it stands now, I can't really argue with that assessment. The gameplay is quite unique and works so well with bongos, but it doesn't. It works with the Wiimote and Nunchuck, and that really holds this game back and is the main reason you shouldn't play it. That being said, yes, you can hate Donkey Kong Barrel Blast all you want. It had so much promise at the beginning and it was held back to this. It's such a disgraceful and disappointing game. But you know what? It's still better than the B-movie game. Actually, I take that back. That's amazing.
Hey, thanks for watching the video. If you like what you see, please leave a like, and if you want to see more and help the channel grow, you should definitely subscribe. It's free for you and means a lot to me. Thank you. What are your thoughts on Donkey Kong Barrel Blast? Do you think it's any good? Let me know down in the comments. If you've got any feedback or recommendations for me, as always, drop that down in the comments as well. I take everything you guys say into consideration. Thank you. With that said, thanks again for watching everyone. I'll see you in the next one.